Every empire thinks it's different, that it's smarter, richer, more advanced, immune to the laws of decline. But history doesn't care about confidence. It only cares about patterns. And right now, one of the world's most successful investors, Ray Dalio, believes that the same forces that destroyed Rome, Britain, and the Dutch Empire are now converging on America. He calls it the changing world order. A cycle of debt, power, and war that always ends the same way. Ray Dalio has spent over 50 years studying the rise and fall of empires, from the Dutch Golden Age to the American century. His conclusion is chilling. Every great power follows the same 5 stages, and the United States is now entering the final one, the stage where debt explodes, where internal division deepens, where foreign rivals smell weakness. And if history is right, this isn't just another recession. It's a generational turning point. In this documentary, we'll uncover the cycle Dalio warns about, how it has played out through history, why 2025 could mark the beginning of a dangerous global shift, and how the odds of a world war may now be higher than at any time in 80 years. Because every collapse begins long before the first shot is fired. The rise and fall of empires, it always begins the same way, with prosperity. Centuries ago, the Dutch Empire ruled the seas. Amsterdam was the heart of global trade. Their currency, the guilder, became the world's reserve. They borrowed cheaply, invested aggressively, and believed their wealth would never fade. But prosperity bred complacency. Debt piled up, wars drained the treasury, and within decades, the world's richest nation became a debtor to its former rivals. Then came the British Empire. The 1800s were their golden age. London financed half the planet. The pound was the standard of value. But after 2 world wars and colossal debts, Britain's dominance faded, replaced by the next rising power, the United States. The cycle repeated. Innovation, expansion, global influence, all followed by debt, polarization, and decline. Ray Dalio calls it the big cycle. A 250-year rhythm of rise, peak, and collapse. Every empire begins with hard work and unity, peaks with prosperity and overconfidence, and ends with division, money printing, and war. It's not just politics, it's mathematics. When debt grows faster than income, collapse becomes inevitable. And history's greatest lesson is this: no empire ever believed its fall would come, until it did. How the same cycle repeats. Look closely. The rhythm is everywhere. Every dominant power, every global empire follows the same invisible script. When the Dutch Empire fell in the 1700s, their debt-to-GDP ratio had exploded. Interest payments consumed their economy. Their navy weakened. The public turned inward, arguing instead of innovating. The British Empire followed suit. In 1914, they entered World War I as the world's creditor. By 1945, they emerged as the world's debtor. The pound collapsed. The dollar rose. The torch quietly passed from London to Washington. Then came America's turn, the empire of credit. After World War II, the U.S. owned 2/3 of global gold reserves. The dollar became the world's anchor, but prosperity created excess. By the 1970s, government spending, debt, and inflation spiraled. President Nixon had to sever the dollar from gold. Money became infinite, and debt became the new fuel of growth. That was the beginning of the modern cycle. Since then, every economic boom has been debt-driven. The dot-com bubble of 2000, the housing crash of 2008, and the pandemic stimulus surge of 2020. Each time, the pattern was the same. Borrow more, spend more, push collapse further away. But here's the twist Dalio warns about. You can delay the reckoning, but you can't delete it. And now, as total global debt surpasses $300 trillion and the U.S. faces its largest deficit in history, the final stage of the cycle is approaching. The same signs that ended past empires are flashing again. The present-day warning ray. Dalio calls it the Great Convergence. A moment when debt, inflation, internal conflict, and global rivalry all collide. just like before every major reset in history. Look around. The signals are everywhere. In the United States, debt to GDP has passed 120%, higher than after World War II. Interest payments now cost more than national defense. The government borrows $1 trillion every 100 days. And the political system? Completely gridlocked. Dalio's data shows what happens next in this phase of an empire's cycle. Rising populism, declining trust, money printing disguised as rescue, and the erosion of the world's reserve currency. For decades, the dollar's dominance allowed America to live beyond its means, buying goods, funding wars, and printing paper others had to accept. But that privilege is under attack. China and Russia are trading oil in yuan. BRICS nations are planning a gold-backed alternative currency. Even U.S. allies are diversifying away from the dollar. The last time this happened, when Britain lost reserve currency status, it didn't happen overnight. It happened in slow motion, through wars, defaults, and inflation. That's the path Dalio believes we're on now. Add to that a geopolitical powder keg. Ukraine, Taiwan, Middle East tension. Every regional conflict is now a potential spark in a system filled with gasoline. Dalio doesn't say World War III will happen. He says the odds are rising. Because history shows what desperate powers do when their empires begin to slip. Economic decline breeds nationalism. Nationalism breeds conflict. And conflict resets the system. The pieces are in motion. The question is, how far will it go this time? The coming reset Ray Dalio doesn't predict doom, he predicts cycles. And according to his model, the American cycle is entering its final stage. He calls it the Big Reset. The moment when money, power, and global trust all collapse and reconfigure into something new. Throughout history, this stage always looks the same. A debt bubble too large to sustain. A government too divided to reform. A currency too inflated to trust. And a people too angry to unite. Sound familiar? When the British pound lost global dominance, inflation consumed the empire from within. When Rome collapsed, it wasn't barbarians. It was bankruptcy, political chaos, and loss of faith in its own system. When the Dutch Empire fell, their financial elite clung to wealth, while the middle class crumbled. Dalio believes America is standing on that same edge. The empire is not gone, but its foundation is cracking. The next stage is what he calls the forced deleveraging. Governments can't pay their debts, so they debase their money instead, quietly taxing everyone through inflation. It's the invisible tax no one votes for, and it's already begun. If the U.S. continues down this path, Dalio warns, the world will face three possible outcomes. Armed in controlled decline, slow erosion of American dominance as power shifts toward Asia, a violent reset, a major war or economic collapse that rebalances the world order overnight, a reinvention, the rarest path, where a nation reforms before the collapse. Which path will America choose? The signs suggest indecision. The markets behave as if nothing is wrong, but history and Dalio's data say otherwise. Every empire believes it's different, right until the moment it's not. And when the reset hits, it won't just be a financial collapse, it'll be a psychological one. The day an entire generation realizes the system they trusted was never built to last. The lesson of history and the cliffhanger. Every empire writes the same ending. A rise fueled by productivity, a peak defined by pride, and a fall driven by debt, division, and denial. Ray Dalio's warning isn't just about economics, it's about behavior. Because civilizations collapse, not when they can't solve their problems, but when they won't. In the 1930s, the world stood at a crossroads: economic depression, rising nationalism, and political chaos. The failure to cooperate led to World War II. Now, nearly a century later, the same ingredients are mixing again. Inflation, inequality, political extremism, and mistrust between global powers. Dalio's model shows that history is rhyming perfectly. Debt levels beyond sustainability, social conflict rising faster than wages, and the return of great power competition. America versus China, West versus East, all playing out under the shadow of nuclear deterrence and digital warfare. He doesn't say it lightly, but in his research, the probability of global conflict in the next decade is higher than at any point since 1945. This isn't fear-mongering. It's math. Empires under pressure make desperate moves. When currencies fail, when alliances fracture, when trust evaporates, the world resets through force. But history also shows something else. The end of one system is always the beginning of another. From Rome's ashes came the Renaissance. From the Great Depression came the American century. So perhaps the real question isn't if collapse is coming, but who will rise from it. A generation shaped by easy money will now face the cost of it. And those who understand the cycle won't just survive it, they'll define what comes next. Because history doesn't destroy, it resets, and the reset has already begun. If this opened your eyes to how financial power shapes history, subscribe. Because the next collapse won't just change the markets, it will change a generation.